a show where we share transportation sales and marketing success stories. I'm Jennifer Carpus Romaine, Executive Director of TMSA, which is a trade nonprofit educating and connecting marketing and sales professionals inside the transportation and logistics space. Today, I'm so excited to have Emily Janson, TMSA's first woman board president, with us. And TMSA is celebrating our 100-year anniversary this year. So, as part of that celebration, we're bringing some people back from the past to hear their stories. So, welcome to the show, Emily. How you doing today?
I'm good. Us old timers, you're bringing back for the 100 years.
Well, I love to share the history of TMSA. I know when I took on this role, people couldn't believe, like, as we were edging closer and closer to that 100 years, because it's such a long time to serve an industry. So, really love bringing people back. So, I know you're out of the industry now, but can you tell me a little bit about your journey back when you were in the industry?
Sure. I started actually in advertising sales, my career. Funny enough, I started in Los Angeles, a Billboard magazine, way back in the 80s, and did a lot of fun stuff there. And when I moved back to the Midwest, which was where I was originally from, I started looking for kind of B2B sales. I was in advertising sales. And so I started on a publication called Traffic World, which now I'm really going to start old timing because I think Traffic World had a couple 100 years history or whatever by the time it was close to probably 150 years. One of the first transportation magazines. So I spent some time there, and I covered both the Midwest and the West Coast with them. So I saw a lot of the country. And then I moved on to a publication called Transportation and Distribution. Under the leadership of Bob Eck, which a lot of people who are old timers will remember that name.
I hear that name spoken highly of often.
Yes, a great guy and dynamic guy. And then I moved on to Supply Chain Brain, which is where I spent the lion's share of my time. And there I worked as an associate publisher, and was involved with TMSA pretty much to the time I left. Probably I left the industry about 3 or 4 years. I guess it's 3 years ago now. And so that was sort of my role in the industry. But in that role, obviously, I got to meet a ton of different people from all the different companies out there, the marketing C-level suite, things like that, as well as, operational people, and got to see the industry, not maybe in sometimes the funnel of your own tunnel at a business where you're selling those services. I got to kind of get to see everyone, and what their whole marketing and sort of corporate goals and agendas were. So it was a good position to sort of give me a better perspective, I think, of the whole industry than if I'd been working just in a siloed company, maybe, so it was good.
Absolutely. And how did you find TMSA, and then what kept you involved in joining the board of directors?
Well, I always like to say they found me. They're like, newbie. No, I think I probably was very vocal. I always have been very forthright with, ideas, and, I'm just that kind of person, very participatory. I don't know, depending on if you're in the room, if that's good or bad. But I think they saw somebody who was probably, I was in my, I guess, early 30s. I just had a child. I think I was maybe even pregnant when I was sworn in, or that stuff started talking about me taking on that role. And I had enough experience in the industry, but probably wasn't jaded, and and I had some great ideas, and I love the idea of the community approach to business, and especially when you can get people of like-minded goals and same challenges, whether it be on the publishing side of the fence, because in those days, as it is now, like a lot of the publishers came, it was a place that it was kind of it wasn't a competitive zone. Same with a lot of the the logistics companies and software companies. In those days it was just logistics and transportation companies, but they would come together, kind of put down all the competitive stuff that goes on in the day-to-day, and just really learn and commune and brainstorm. And I thought that was a really good thing. Anytime you have community in any setting, I think that's a positive thing. So, and then, I love the idea of being able to kind of put my perspective on it. I'm I'm an eventy person in my personal life. I host a lot of events, parties, things like that. That's something that I'm very comfortable with in that space, in that sort of director event producer role. So being able to do that on a B2B sense in this environment was I had the skill set. Let's put it that way. At least I thought I
I
did.
I love that. And I love when you talked about the community aspect and competitors coming together, but having like real conversations, because that
Yeah,
is still like the
sure.
biggest part of TMSA and what we are really most proud of. And now we call that annual conference is called the Elevate Conference. It's coming up June 9th through 11th in New Orleans. So if people listening are interested, you can register at events.tmsatoday.org. But I love that you talked about how that's always kind of been the thread of
Yeah.
this association, because it truly is. When people ask me like, what makes TMSA different than the other places? Of course, we focus on marketing and sales specifically in the industry, and not like some of the other spaces. But it's also just that real community based group. So
Right.
I love that's what you referenced. So you were the first woman board president. Since then, Candy Cybader was also president. And now, come June at Elevate, we're actually going to be swearing Beth Malik in, who is the senior director of marketing at CMC3. So I'm
Yeah.
curious, as she starts her presidency, do you have any advice for her?
Well, Beth is a seasoned pro. I know Beth, so I'm not too worried about her. I don't think she needs too much advice from me. I think she's probably got this, in the role that she has. I would say that, obviously she's got to honor sort of some of the past, traditions and things like that as much as possible, the good things. But I think it's very incumbent upon the new president to really bring their own, I would say vision, opinions, thoughts. They have to listen. They have to be inclusive. It's not a steamroll kind of thing. But I do think that's what makes an organization grow. We need different types of personalities, different types of skill sets in that role, right? And I think you kind of have to self-evaluate. What are you the best at, and then apply those to the position, and then she'll be fine.
I love that advice. I think that's just great leadership advice for everybody. Like really, I just actually was on a call talking about, okay, like what is my skill matrix and where do I fit in here? And then how do we kind of build things
Yeah,
around? So
and
really,
apply.
really good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then she'll cultivate great, the other thing for her is she'll cultivate relationships through that process that she didn't have before. So I would say to her, don't be also too so worried about making sure that everything else and everybody else is connecting. Make sure that you pay attention to those connections that you make along the way, because that's the thing that you take away is obviously those relationships when you're done.
Absolutely. 100%. When we talked on our prep call, we were talking about how your presidency was in the 90s, and you were a working mother, which you referenced here. And so like I really gravitated to that because those are still things that we're talking about, being the balance between being a working mom and then having this professional life, taking on this leadership role. So I'm curious, if you have any advice on navigating that. I know it was so funny to me because so much of what you were talking about from the past of like I had a very young child. You said like I may have been pregnant while being signed in as president. That was a mouthful. But what advice do you have for us that are still in those trenches and still trying to figure out how to best manage that?
Oh man, those years are difficult. I don't care what anyone's doing. I was just talking to my sister-in-law today, who's an older but young, meaning she had children older in life. She had her career and she's starting, but you know, she's staying at home right now, but it's just incredibly difficult just doing that, right? And then you add on trying to cultivate and grow a professional, you know, persona and career during those years. It's very, very difficult. So I don't profess to be an expert. I will say the first thing I say is be kind to yourself. Realize there's just a limitation, right, on how much you can do and how much you can be there for everyone. So being able to prioritize in terms of what you really need to get done on a given day. As much as you have your list of what you'd love to do, some days it's just what can I accomplish today. And I think you have to line up your support. I think it's like you have to be your own CEO, right? And your house and your family is the company. And how do you best apply different people to the skill sets that you need when you need them? And don't be afraid to ask for help. I remember there were times that I would be gone and I, maybe was breastfeeding at the time and thinking to myself, oh my God, how am I going to do this with my child? It was a difficult feeder. And sometimes I was like, and I had the luxury of obviously being able to do that. being able to say, okay, I'm going to take some of my earnings, put my caregiver on the plane with me to go somewhere. And I remember, like, taking care of my child in a bathroom, waiting to go into a convention and handing off and doing all these crazy things that you do, you know what I mean, to make it work. So I think I always have a very soft spot for working mothers in any capacity, because anyone who's not done it just doesn't know how difficult it is. And then you're plagued by all those feelings of guilt, and you know what I'm talking about, right?
Mhm.
Now, obviously, my children are in their 20s. They made it. So obviously, I just okay, they're good. They're prospering adults. So, God, whatever. Thank you. My hand to the universe's hand, or whatever you believe. Anyway, the point of it is that I think that you really have to be, again, back to that skill set. Know your skill sets. Know what you're capable of. And be able to say no. That no word,
Oof.
learning it early in life to everyone is going to be your best asset, I believe. Not waiting till you're so spun out that you're like, no, it's just
Mm.
setting boundaries early on and being able to and it's still going to go awry. You know what I mean? But at least setting those boundaries early on for your own life and running your own life like you're the CEO. I mean, I don't know. That's the best business sort of acronym that I can give it.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And yes, the power in saying no is incredibly important. Something I'm definitely still learning. Um, and when you're talking about breastfeeding, actually it made me think about like, oh, we should have an option if people are breastfeeding to have like a space at conference for them to do that, like to have a separate room. So
Yeah,
I'm going to like put that on my to-do list, because I actually don't know if you know this, but TMSA now actually has a DEI task force, and we launched it
I
last
think
year.
that's
And
fabulous. Yeah.
part of what we're doing is trying to be more equitable and inclusive. And this year's conference, we have the first ever TMSA wellness room, and it'll be a space to like chill out for a minute and take a breath, and low lighting. And I'm trying to get some like nice like music when you're at the spa and just feel good, and some like stress balls in there, because it can be really overwhelming being at a conference. And
Yeah.
especially, and so I was like, I need to like write that down for other missions. But um is there anything, as we try to be more equitable and inclusive, is there anything that you've seen over your time in the industry, or now that you're out of the industry, that you think would be good for us to provide resources on, or that you think that people in the industry would enjoy having at a conference or membership?
Well, I'm a big on my private life. I've always been very interested in wellness and looking at life as a whole. In terms of and obvious, I shouldn't say obviously, but getting to that third chapter, as they call it, if life segments.
Mm.
That third chapter in life, looking back. And I do think that wellness piece, I'm spending a lot of time in Europe now. I have a daughter that lives in Europe, and I just got back from a month from Italy, in Italy. And one thing I really value about the way the Europeans approach life is that it's that work-life balance. They seem to have it way more figured out than we. Okay. There's a pridefulness that we have here in America about, how many people do talk, I'm so busy, I'm so busy, it's like a badge of honor here. And you
Mhm.
don't hear people say that so much there, and you see them go through their workday and they get everything accomplished, and there isn't this frenetic sort of energy around work. And I think if you're getting people to go to TMSA to be connective, and there's a community and a learning aspect of it, the more you can put that in. I love the fact that you're creating those spaces, but giving permission to people to pause, right? Pause in their lives. It's okay to actually take 10 minutes to talk to a colleague, and you're not out there, doing something else that you feel is going to make someone think that you're doing your job better because you're at this, whatever, session or
Mhm.
something. Maybe that 10 minutes that you spent with a colleague or someone you didn't know provides really valuable insights, or gives you a little lower blood pressure about something that's going on in your day. You know what I'm saying? So I
Mhm.
think those things are really, really going to have to become more part of American culture, as I'm just looking at it in terms of the way we do business. I mean, I think about when I was young and having children. I mean, there weren't formal maternity leaves in a lot of companies. I mean, I think I was back to work 2 days after I gave birth both times. Like, there was just
Oof.
not the resources that you see now, and I use Europe as an example, a minimum of 6 months off paid, you know what I mean, for both husbands and wives. A lot of times it's a year. I mean, we have to start looking at some of those things. So I think the way that TMSA can be a leader in those areas is to realize that that's what you're asking people to do. You're asking them to take a pause from their daily life and come and learn and communicate. If that can be an adjunct to that, I think that gets people more in that headspace, right? And then in terms of obviously the inclusivity in the world today, we have to look at that and be better about that. I think it comes from listening. I can't sit here and say what someone else's experience is in life. I don't know. I only know what my experience is, and I'm not going to judge them for what their experience or make a commentary on what I think they should be doing based on my limited experience in their world, right? So I think the more listening and the more outreach you can do to say, we want to be inclusive, help us, tell us what you think we need to do, you'll get there.
Absolutely. And that is so aligned with the DEI task force that we have. When it was really important to me that we launched that, and that when we did, it wasn't just to check boxes.
Mhm.
Because being inclusive and being more equitable isn't about just one thing.
Right.
So we have racial ethnicity, we have support
Age.
age, LGBTQ. We have even like neurodivergence. Like that's part of the wellness room. It's like, yeah, we have a lot of people who have anxiety and have
Yeah.
neurodivergence and just like need a minute. And how can we
Handicaps,
support that?
yeah, everything.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean,
Absolutely. Or even like we do have a lot of optional networking this year. And I put on there like this is everything's within like 5-10 minutes of walking. But if you need us to provide transportation, let us know and we will buy the Uber for you to get to where we need to go. It's just really thinking about how we can support people. I
yeah,
feel like for me, when we bring up DEI, a lot of times people are like, well, those can be really awkward conversations. And it's like, but if you create a workspace that people don't have to bring it up themselves and you're just providing it, it doesn't have to be awkward.
I
Something as
agree.
simple as
I
like letting
Yeah.
people pick their own desk chair.
Yeah.
Like, great, make them
And
feel
having
good.
different types of chairs for different
Mhm.
people of different weights, people of different challenges, in terms of physical challenges, right?
Mhm.
So it's like just thinking through some of these things, making sure things are wheelchair accessible or whatever the things are. My mom has one,
The walkers.
they're the walkers and
Mhm.
rollerators, things like that. You thinking through some of the things, basically getting out of your own experience and
Mhm.
looking at it from maybe somebody who has a different experience. And I think if you lead with that, you're always going to win. And you're not going to ever get it perfect because someone's going to
No.
say, "Oh, what about peanut allergies? What about this? What about that?" It's very difficult to please everybody, as everyone knows
Mhm.
all the time. But I think people do appreciate the atmosphere that you're trying and that you're communicating, that if you don't have it right, please tell you how you can do it better. And I think, if the world did that, we'd be right in a better, better spot.
I agree. So it's something I'm really proud of and something that we continue to develop and grow. I
Kudos,
know.
kudos. I think
Thank
that's
you. I really appreciate that. And I
yeah,
know we talked about age too, and it wasn't just that you were the first female board president, but you were in your 30s when you took
yeah.
that
Early days, yeah,
position.
yeah.
So I remember when we were talking, I'm like, oh, a woman leader of TMSA in her 30s. Like, this is my life. Like, tell me how you did it. Like,
Well, I think I was naive, quite honestly. It's so funny because I think back on the industry, and it's funny having you coming out, to say, "Hey, would you want to do this podcast?"
Mhm.
And I feel because I'm in such a different life now, right? My design world and the things that I do, and I own a store and things like that. So I've diversified, and in terms of my interests and things like that. But it made me think back in terms of like what it was really like. And I remember going into conventions when it was like I used to call it planes, trains, and automobiles, right? And there were no women. I was literally like one of the only women that I remember walking around convention floors. There maybe be a couple of us. Now, there were some people maybe in the booth, support people and things like that, but it just wasn't a female. Now, even in the years that I left, I was shocked when I took the time to really look and go, oh my gosh, there's so many women now.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? It was so gratifying to see. But it made me think about that. And I was thinking about like when I would go in my 20s, go into booths at conventions, and there were scantily clad women in bikinis, as a way to draw the exhibitors into the booth, and with golf swings, and the guys, just stuff that is so un-PC today that would just never happen. And I thought the fact that I was like trying to be taken seriously walking in, you know what I mean, when contemporary, it was just, but there was a part of me that was like, maybe so, like I said, either so naive or so genuine in what I thought my role was, in terms of I have to do this and take it seriously. Yes, there was discomfort, but it was kind of like just pushing it aside, to do that. And I think looking at that, it's like, there's always going to be that. I just talked to someone today who was in a boardroom. They were talking to me about, funny enough, they were in a boardroom with all men, and they felt there wasn't outright commentary, but there was a level of discomfort, because it was like they weren't really validating the experience of the feminine community, right? It was sort of like, this is the way we've always done it, blah, 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 blah. And there was just an edge, like, we know better, that whole thing. And she was struggling a little bit in terms of how to deal with that. And I thought, the way you deal with it is, come from a place of understanding first, right? We're never going to change people that, at least we're not going to be able to claim that change. If it happens, it's subtly, it might be multiple factors, right? If people come with predisposed prejudices, agendas, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So, and this is getting long-winded, but the point of it is that I think you have to accept, first of all, that people in the world like this exist. Doesn't reflect necessarily on your skill set and what you bring to the table. I try not to take, and I think all those years, I didn't take it personally. Now, if someone was a complete jerk, of course I took it personally, right? Or something untoward happened. But most of the time, you have to understand, this is all they know. This is all people know. So I think you go in, know your stuff, provide value, really, really try and think about what you're there for in terms of the value you bring to the table. Try and remove all that other clutter from your head. And most of the time you can cut through. A lot of times I think humor helps, right? Trying to get to the humanity of who that person is. And I'm not saying this is just men or women. I've run into women that are very much like, you have that problem with too. There's a little misogyny within females as well sometimes, or whatever kind of prejudice it is. Okay. There's prejudice on every level, whether it be political, religious, whatever. Try and put that aside and get to the human of the person. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I think that's, am I answering your question? I kind of went around the bend, but
yeah, no, I think it's really important to remember that whether we're coming at this from like a female lens or from a younger age lens or ethnicity ends or whatever that looks like,
right.
Bringing your perspective to the table, whether it's the first one or not, at least that perception is at that perspective is at the table. And that was something that took me really like a decent amount of my career. Like I used to work at a tech firm with really, really smart technological people. I'm not that person. And so I would feel kind of dumb because they would talk this language that I didn't understand. And I never wanted to admit that I didn't understand what they were saying. And then one day I realized we sell to marketing and salespeople, and I'm that person. So if I don't understand what you're saying, they're certainly not going to understand. So all of a sudden I realize my perception and my perspective is actually really important. And then that became empowering to me.
Yes, exactly. Yes, you articulated that so much better. No, because it's true. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, know what you know. Again, it goes back to know your skill set. I think don't, and the age thing is perfect to say, I don't understand this. At some point when I'm a 28-year-old woman, I'm not relatively new in an industry. I don't think somebody who's 65 is going to expect me, whether they're man or woman, to have the same kind of knowledge. Me pretending that I know or bolstering up that I know as much as them is off-putting, right? It's just simply off-putting. So to be authentic right from the gate, know what you're supposed to know, that whole sort of stay in your lane a little bit, and like understand that you have to respect that people are going to know more than you in some cases. But if you have a good idea, don't let your self-confidence be eroded by these other factors so that you don't speak up. And I think that was something innately that I had. that I think, and I just wasn't that intimidated. I've never been intimidated by people, no matter who they are. So I think that helps. But I think you really, really, like you said, it's really understand sort of what your skill set is and not be afraid to say, I have this skill, I don't have that, help me with this, and you're actually helping as a marketer come from that perspective.
Right. I think it's so important. And like, this is what I tell, like, pretty much any, like, I don't want everyone just to agree with me. And so having that different perspective at the table is really important, because if everyone just agrees with the initial idea, then it's never going to be the best idea. It's just going to be
Exactly.
the first idea. So the ability to work together and have like constructive conflict, like, is it incredibly important. And I feel like the more voices, so you were talking about being like a younger voice, like, we are really proud, we do have an under 30 on our board of directors. We
Yeah,
had
that's
two, but
great.
one of them then turned 30. But so, like, and we look at
They're
the,
allowed.
yeah, you're allowed to age, but we look at the gender split, and we're trying to be, we really are being mindful when we grow that, because we want to hear. And especially in this industry, there are so many younger people coming up, so, like, we want to hear their voices. We're trying to meet their needs of what they would need from education and networking and resources. So if we don't have those voices speaking out, then we can't hear them.
Well,
So
I also think too, the whole idea of collaboration. When you're in a situation and you're very insecure about your own position, maybe within the company, within a new role, whatever it is, the natural thing is to kind of want to, show how much you know, and I can do this on my own, and all that kind of stuff. And as I age, obviously you find out collaboration, when you collaborate and people collaborate effectively together, everybody wins.
mhm.
Everybody wins. And it's also a little protective if the idea does flop. You're not out there on your own either. You know what I mean? So it has some benefits that way. But I think looking at collaboration as your friend and your ally as you go through, the work life, and this is in personal life too, but collaboration on all fronts is usually a good thing. It has to be managed well, right? It can get a little, if you don't have the right people in there and you have someone that's taking, too much of the agenda a different way. Obviously, those things kind of have to manage, but good collaboration to me is wonderful. And I think it will be the thing that probably propels most people if they look back on their careers. Those are the things that propel you forward and where you learn the most.
And did you find in your career that, like, industry associations was part of that? I
Yeah.
mean, TMSA included, but
Yeah.
why do you think that industry associations have continued to be so important and part of industry?
Well, I think people, number one, crave communication. And everyone wants to go, like, as mothers. Remember that? You'd crave, I'll just put it back to that. You'd crave sitting around with other mothers. Is this normal? Is this right? You know, in industry associations, you get to talk to people who normally you might be in a competitive scenario with, or you would never get to know, right? Both sides of the fence. What do salaries look like? What should I be? What kind of compensation? What kind of vacation packages? What kind of growth opportunities are there at your company versus mine? How is your company handling inclusivity? All those kinds of being able to, like, gauge where you are in your life by the experience and the things that are out there, I think from a professional and personal development are huge, right? It's why do we still join organizations? I'm still a part of organizations now outside the industry, and some are professional, some are personal. I think growth, if you're interested in personal professional growth, it's one of the best places to do it.
Fantastic. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I just have one more question for you.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite that I ask almost everyone I interview.
Okay.
If you could go back in time and
Okay.
advise a younger Emily,
All right.
anything, personally or professionally, when would you go back to, and what would you tell her?
Well, okay. I would probably say to myself and others that if it's not going to matter in 5 years, that old saying, don't sweat it today. Because I think
Mhm.
we spend a lot of time, you know, should I have written that email different? Oh, stressing over little things that really, in the end of the day, don't really matter. There are going to be things that are happen that are upsetting, that are difficult. Whether it be a job layoff, somebody you love retires. There's just a ton of things. Obviously, everybody knows that happens. Um, or you get into a scuff with, a boss. We've all had those, right? Or a coworker, things like that. There's problems. really use that thing. If this really isn't going to matter in 5 years in my life, you got to let it go because it's just not worth it. And I got good at practicing that early on, but I think that's a key one for people because I think in this world where everyone is even more anxious, anxiety was not a word that was really used a lot when I was young. Now it's on everyone's mind all the time. And so I think the things that we can do to stave off that anxiety, any tools you can use are key for longevity, right? Not only in your life, but professionally. I think calming down and really looking at things like this too shall pass, taking a more removed approach to some things where you could get really involved and get wound up about it, probably a good idea. I also think that from this side of the fence, know that the things that you're doing, no matter if you like them or not. I mean, I remember cleaning offices when I was like 13 and 14, okay, after school. And I'm thinking, what would I ever get from this, right? Like, I'm just everything I've done, and I've done a ton of different things in my life from a work perspective, both side hustles and professionally and things like that. You learn from everything. And I think giving people the permission to understand that just because they've went to school for accountancy or whatever, to be an accountant, whatever it is, doesn't necessarily mean that's what you have to do for the rest of your life. Look at the skill set. Don't look at the degree, and I have changed my career entirely. Now I'm in a very successful thing that was self-created. Wouldn't have known at 25 that this is what I would be doing today, but I let myself evolve with the skill sets that I had and try. Trying is a huge thing. Don't be afraid to try new things. And don't be afraid if something's not working for you, you feel like you've outgrown something or you've done everything you can in a specific industry. That whole adage, life is short. If you have an inkling that you want to do something, do it. So that's what I would say. I don't know if it's like if I could do it all over again, because I did do a lot of those things, but those are the things that I think are really important to think about. And really, if you're in something you don't love, go, this isn't necessarily where I'm going to be 10 years from now. You can do something else.
This has been, in my brain, every time you've been talking, I'm like, the amount of one-liners that you have produced in this half-hour interview is phenomenal. Like, I could just continue to sit and talk to you forever, but I really appreciate your time today. I remember, yes, when I approached you, like, would you do this interview? You were like, why? I'm not even in the industry.
Yeah, what do I have to talk about?
But your advice, your experience in the industry, and just as a human, as TMSA celebrates its 100 year, you definitely have a marker and a space here. And so I am truly honored to have been able to have this chat.
And I wish you really a lot of luck. I think it's taken a turn, in terms of like for the new 100 years. I think it's on the right path under your leadership. I think this is really fabulous. I think your energy and your kind of looking at where you want this to grow and what it could become is right on point. So I think TMSA is in good hands with you.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. If anyone listening is interested in learning more about TMSA and our 100-year anniversary, please come celebrate with us June 9th through 11th in New Orleans. And On the Move is a new podcast, and it is a member perk that you can apply to be on the show. So we have a QR code in the corner if you're watching this in the video format. If you are listening on a podcast, you can email me at jennifer@tmsatoday.org and I will send you the link. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emily, and thank you for your service as the first woman president of the board at TMSA.
And hi to all my friends, anybody who ends up watching this who knew in my past life. I hope everyone's well, and I wish everyone well, and thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, see you.
That is all for On the Move today.